Good morning, and welcome to another episode of the Morning Tip-Off with Imamn, brought to you by Basketball News. I am really excited because this is like my first solo episode, so I got to be sitting here talking to myself. But I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who's watched all week. Thank you to all of my guests who've joined. Thank you to Alex, to Kelsey, to Katie, to Sidra. This has been a really, really fun week. And so today, I asked people to send in some questions. Thank you to everybody who sent in questions. I won't be sitting here just talking to myself. I guess technically I will still be sitting here talking to myself, but I have some questions. So, and if you guys want, good morning. Good morning to people in the chat. Thank you. All right, so let's begin. All right, so I asked for some questions. I'm just going to go through all of them sent in on Twitter. I'll probably be doing this a lot, so please, guys, send them in. And yeah, okay. So we'll start with 416 SB, who asks, with all these players testing positive for COVID and games having to be postponed for not having enough active players, at what point does the league call it? Or do they call it? Will they recreate the bubble like last season or cut the season short? I think the league knew the risk that they were taking when they started the season, right? And like the players all decided that they didn't want to do the bubble. So like they came into the season knowing that this was a calculated risk. They knew everything that they were doing, and they decided, one, the bubble wasn't going to happen, and two, we're not going to finish the season without crowning someone champs. We saw that last season. They had to push through. So I just kind of feel like we're going to get the same thing this year, where until the wheels fall off, they're going to continue. And even then, they're going to push through, whether it's a disastrous end, and I hope it isn't, but they're going to continue to push through regardless of how many games they have to postpone or what happens in the playoffs. It'll be difficult. I think possibly a bubble for the playoffs could be a thing. Like maybe you can convince the players to do something like that. But outside of that, I don't know. I feel like the league took a risk. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they decided that this is how they were going to do it. All right, so VTech Poppy asks, what's the likelihood of success for this Nets team? Can they coexist and gel by the time the playoffs start? Or is this something where you need a full training camp to get used to the team? I think the likelihood that they make the finals or get out the East is high. Like, to me, they're the favorites. And I would have had them as the favorites prior to the Harden trade. I just think that Kevin Durant is the best player in the Eastern Conference. And more times than not, the best player on a team wins a series. And so to me, I had them there right away. And I think obviously adding Harden improves that. But like, I think, okay, so the success for the team is high because you have two of the greatest offensive players in the history of basketball with Kevin Durant and James Harden. And then you have Kyrie Irving, who's one of the best offensive players in the game today. So yes, their success rate will be high. Can they coexist and gel is a really good question. I don't know. And I don't know that really anybody has this answer. And I've seen a lot of people saying, well, they asked for this. They wanted this. We don't really know what they asked for or wanted because apparently now, we all thought that like, oh, Kyrie and KD wanted Nash. And then Kyrie has come out and basically, I don't know if he said or if the report's out that he didn't want Nash. So we really do not know. And also, Kyrie wanted in Boston and then he wanted out. Harden wanted to play with CP3, and then he didn't. Harden wanted to play with Russell Westbrook, and then he didn't. Like, these guys want stuff and then just decide that they don't. And they're kind of like really contentious players and personalities. So how that gels in time is going to be something that I'm really interested in watching. I think that their talent can like outweigh some of like any of the negatives that they have. That's a lie. I don't think that. Just because like their personalities are some of the more interesting ones in the NBA, including Kevin Durant. Although I feel like Kevin Durant kind of fits in seamlessly anywhere because he's the best player, best offensive player in basketball. So it's kind of like, all right, you just work around that. But how they coexist, I don't know. And is it something that you need a full training camp to get used to the team? I don't think they need a full training camp because it's not like they play like a complex style of defense or anything, right? They're not switching a ton. And their offense isn't, doesn't require a lot of motion and like they're like Kyrie and Harden are two players who are notorious for not really playing well off ball. So I just can't imagine that you need a big training camp to make their chemistry really fit on the court. It's more so their personalities that would be the thing holding them back, in my opinion. And in the chat, let me know if you guys agree. All right, so Tortacular asks, do you think the more volatile nature of the season will cause teams to be more aggressive or more passive as far as roster changes go? That's an interesting question. Do you think that the more volatile nature of the season, I think it's boring to say it this way, but I think it's both, right? It depends on where the team is. I think that there are a lot of teams in the bottom 2/3 that shouldn't make a move and won't make a move. The Raptors are a perfect example of that, where it's why do you need to get better? To be a second round out? What is the point in doing that? However, if you're in the top third of the league, what we've seen is that anything can happen. And I do think it's more open than a lot of people are giving both these conferences credit for. I think the Lakers are still favorites to win it all, but crazier things have happened. We literally just saw a 5 seed make the finals last season. So I just think in a weird year like this, if you have a chance at it, you might as well go for it. So Philly, Milwaukee, Boston, even if you have a shot at this, Miami, Denver, I think you should go all in. And then if you're a team like Portland now with the injuries, the Raptors or anything like that that's in the bottom 2/3, just stay put. You guys should be the most prudent because what? No, it's not happening for you. I'm sorry. Lucas Gaynor asks, general thoughts on the Harden deal from the Nets perspective. Are they a finals lock? I don't think that they're a lock, but they're my favorites to make the finals in the Eastern Conference. I do have questions about their defense. I do have questions about chemistry fit. I do think that they're the most talented team in the Eastern Conference, but sometimes the offensive talent that you have kind of maxes out, right? There is I hate to say there's only one ball, but there really is. And so it's amazing that you can have Kyrie, KD, and Harden on the floor and you throw in Joe Harris like that. Their offense is going to be potent. It's going to destroy teams on any given night. And I think that they definitely have a chance to win it all even. I don't see how they guard AD. I don't think they win it all. But at the same time, their defense isn't going to look good, and I think that there could be real chemistry issues. So how do I feel about this deal for the Nets? It's risky. I'm never one to want to give up that much draft capital and control over your draft for 7 years because you're trading for a guy who's 32 to pair with your best player who's 32, who just came off of one of the worst injuries in basketball. And granted, KD has looked stellar, but there's so much risk involved in that makes me a little uncomfortable. And I've really had to sit with, and I talked with Sidra about this yesterday. I'm kind of having to sit with the fact that the Nets don't need draft picks in the way that every other team does. Right? The Lakers and the Nets, I think those are probably the two. Maybe the Clippers and the Knicks should be in this category. I don't even think the Knicks really look at draft picks the same way because what was the last rookie extension that they had signed, right? So all of these teams don't really look at picks in the same way as the rest of the league because they constantly want to just pay the best player in basketball and just start from there as opposed to developing their young talent and their young core. I kind of look at that Lakers situation where they had the number 2 pick in every single draft for a decade, basically. And I look at the development of those players, and I don't think that was something that the Lakers were prioritizing at all because they knew when the opportunity came to trade for a superstar that they were going to do that. And that's pretty much what it seemed like those draft picks were, those young guys were, was just trade bait for later on down the line. And so I think the Nets kind of see it in the same way. And I think that that's kind of the benefits that those markets have, where they don't have to worry about drafting and developing their young talent in order to contend. The Nets have seen that they can be a blustering, flustering mess and still get KD and Kyrie as soon as they have some sort of promise. So for that reason, I'm kind of like working in my head the idea that like the draft picks that they've given up, or the control over their draft for the next 7 years that they've given up, isn't the same thing as if the Raptors were to do it, the Pacers were to do it, the Thunder were to do it, or any other team. Sora Lasers asks, between the reported asks for Harden, who missed out more, the Celtics or the Heat? See, here's the thing. The Celtics like to dangle one of their J's. Obviously, it would have been Jaylen Brown in this. I think it was Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, and a few first rounders. And I don't know who the first rounders are. But, like, here's the thing. Danny Ainge is involved in a trade talk for a superstar, and he doesn't pull the trigger. We've heard that story time and time again. It's going to happen for the next 10 years because that's exactly what he does. And whatever, sure. And then the Heat. The list of things that he was that they were asking for the Heat, I'm going to try to pull it. I feel like it was an insane amount of, it was like, I feel like they should have asked Pat Riley for his like child at that point. I'm going to pull up what it was. Give me 1 second, guys. Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, Precious Achua, Kendrick Nunn, salary filler, 2 first-round picks, and 4 pick swaps. Yeah, no, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot for a team that just made the finals and probably see their guys as like, I think the Heat have a shorter window than we're giving them credit for. Like, I understand that Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson are the young guys, but I'm looking at Jimmy Butler as really the heart and soul of that team. And like, they're going to have to start paying their young guys in a bit too. So I understand the win now mode. And I put them in that tier, despite them not really playing like that right now. And granted, a whole bunch of stuff is happening to that team, but I put them in that tier, and I want them to make a win now move. But if Victor Oladipo is like begging basically to be there, I don't know that you give up everything to get James Harden right now. So, all right. Next question. Sora Lasers asks, should assists be named Paskets? Yes. Why haven't we done that already? Paskets. No, honestly, on second thought, my mom wouldn't be able to pronounce the difference between baskets and paskets, so it'd just be too confusing. For the sake of her, I'm going to say no. But that's a funny question. 416 asks, which team has surprised you the most in the early season? Which team has surprised me the most in the early season? Honestly, to start the year off, there were like a lot of really fun, surprising teams. Orlando was one of them, and I talked to Alex about that on Monday. And then, of course, they have an ACL tear to Markelle Fultz. It's just injuries left, right, and center for them, and they haven't really looked right since. Atlanta started off really hot and have come back down to earth. It kind of feels like that looking up and down. The standings here, it felt like all these teams that really started off hot have come down to earth. One of the teams that I've just been most excited to watch was the Phoenix Suns. And I was talking about this last week on Dishes and Dimes. There's this idea. So I never really think of Phoenix as a defensive team just because of their entire history. They've never really been a defensive team. And so, you know, on paper, you should understand why their defense got much better, right? Like, you have Mikal Bridges already there, but now you have Jay Crowder to pair with him on the wings, who can like kind of roam and just like take on some other wing defenders for him, right? And Mikal and Jay are great wing tandem defenders. And then you also have Chris Paul, who comes into the mix, who's of course a great defender. And I also think DeAndre Ayton, probably because of his early years, gets a bad rap and a bad reputation as a defender. And so you look at that and you're like, no, they're damn good on both ends of the ball. Well, if their defense is good, their offense is going to be good. And I think we all came in trusting their offense, and it was the defense that was a surprise, but really it shouldn't have been. And so I don't know, like, that to me has been just like a really a really fun team to watch. And Cleveland, I didn't expect them to be entertaining to me, which I don't know is probably my fault for not watching Sexland entirely. But yeah, like I found them to be really fun, and now they got Jared Allen, the apple of my eye. So I'm excited to watch that. Unless Cleveland, you would like to give the Toronto Raptors Jared Allen, we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. Namaste. But yeah, no, they've been really fun. I'm trying to think about who else. Yeah, it kind of feels like everyone outside of like Washington, Detroit, Minnesota, and like Toronto have been fun at one point or another and have like come back down to earth, but like have had really kind of fun and bright moments. Like even the Charlotte Hornets with Gordon Hayward kind of, dropping lots of points and LaMelo being really, really exciting. So it feels like it's everybody but Minnesota, Toronto, Washington, and Detroit that have had some bright moments this season, which is great for the league, but also terrible for the league because this has been the weirdest season ever where a team could like can win by like 40 on a night and then go back and like lose by like 20 the next night, and it just be like, how is this the same team that we're watching? But that's kind of what the season has been. Tortacular asks, which player in a new situation has impressed you the most so far? I just mentioned it with the Charlotte Hornets. I thought Gordon Hayward has been really good. He kind of went from like being a punchline for like MAGA jokes to now still being a punchline for MAGA jokes, but like not an afterthought on his team anymore, right? Like he's averaging 22 a game, which is the most. And granted, he was out in this last game and had a bad game against Dallas in his last game that he played. But he's averaging the most since his All-Star season. He dropped his career high. He had like a really great week last year, which is fun to watch. But who have probably been who's impressed me the most in their new situation? Probably John Wall and Kevin Durant, just because they're still John Wall and Kevin Durant. And that has been really fun for me as a basketball fan. I'm sure for like everybody else as a basketball fan, like John Wall looking like John Wall and Kevin Durant coming back and looking like one of the best players in basketball. I don't know. It's very exciting. All right. Tortacular asks again, is there a realistic acquisition the Raptors can make this season that will legitimately raise their ceiling? Yes. I mean, there are realistic trade options, but why should the Raptors make them is my question. Like, what's the point to be a second round out instead of a first round out? I don't know that, like, it makes all that different. It makes that much of a difference. Like, unless you want to make this trade for a more long-term thing, fit alongside Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet and OG and Chris Boucher in your core there, unless that's what you're doing, I don't know. But then again, any big that you have, please send our way. Thank you. But yeah, I don't really care for a trade right now, because like what is that really going to do? What are they going to be, a second round out? That's what we're trying to do. Kashmiri Chai says, what do you think about the Eastern Conference exec who said that Ben Simmons has not improved at all since coming into the league? Do you think he's the same player he was in his rookie year? Do you think he's holding the Sixers back? So Ben Simmons, this is what the exec said. Ben Simmons has not improved in one area of his game at all since coming into the league. He's the same player today as he was in his rookie year, and teams have figured him out in the playoffs. Here's why they won't go far. Fighting words. I mean, I think what I would say to that is he was a damn good player when he was a rookie. But let's see if I can pull this up. Give me 1 second, you guys. All right. So if we're just looking at box score numbers right away, he's basically averaged 15 or 16, 8 and 8 since his rookie season. His numbers look identical. His free throw rate is identical, basically. He gets to the line maybe 4 to 5 times a game and averages around 60% from the line straight away from his rookie season. Just looking at this box score, there has really been, and even just thinking about his game, like he came in as a great defender, as a great ball handler, as a great playmaker. But the knocks on his game is he doesn't get to the line enough. He doesn't drive enough. Probably because he's scared of getting to the line and he's scared of shooting because he's been really bad from there, right? So he's not getting to the line, he's not finishing enough, and he's not taking enough threes. And just looking at the numbers here, we're getting that exact same thing. I don't think he's been what's holding them back because I still think he's a really good player. But I think it's fair to say that he hasn't improved in any particular area of his game since being a rookie. And like DeMar DeRozan is kind of, to me, a perfect example of a player who you can say that DeMar DeRozan hasn't taken threes, right? And that is a huge knock on his game. He hasn't improved his three-point shot, and he hasn't improved his defense. But the one thing that you can't say is that DeMar DeRozan doesn't improve every single season. He improves an aspect of his game. His playmaking has improved from like it's night and day what he does, right? His ability to get to the line has improved like immensely over this time, right? And so when you knock a guy like DeMar DeRozan or Ben Simmons for not being efficient because they're not shooting threes, I think that's kind of unfair for a guy like DeMar who gets to the line a ton, which makes his points efficient, right? And so to me, that's kind of the difference between those two players when you knock them for not being able to shoot threes is you can actually point to facets of DeMar's game that he has improved. His finishing ability, his ability to get to the line. His strength has just improved tenfold. His playmaking, his ball handling skills. And looking at Ben Simmons, I can't say that he's improved that. But also, if I'm going to defend Ben Simmons here, he was a more polished product coming into the league than a guy like DeMar DeRozan who was straight athleticism, right? Like that's what DeMar was. He was an athlete. He didn't have the tools to be a basketball player, whereas Ben Simmons came in a basketball player. He legit looked like a man, whereas a lot of these rookies come in looking like a kid. So in fairness to Ben, he's still damn good. But yes, I don't think that he's improved in any particular point in his game. So OZ Raps fans asks, should Boucher be starting and getting extra minutes as well? So I got a couple of questions about Boucher here, so I'm just going to answer them here. So for me, I think part of my hesitancy in like being on the start Boucher train was the Raptors' rebounding rate. Their Boucher with the starters, at least last week, I don't know what the numbers are this week, but Boucher with the starters had a defensive rebound rate of 50%. You cannot be giving up 50% of your rebounds to the opposing team. They cannot be. That's twice as many possessions as they now get. You cannot be giving up that many offensive boards. And I think that's, to me, was the biggest issue with him playing with the starters is that they could not rebound worth a damn. And now I'm kind of looking at it like, who cares? Honestly, like on the one hand, it's like you cannot give up that many extra offensive possessions to the opposing team. But now it's like you can't play Alex Len or Aaron Baines. I don't see it for them. I am so sorry. And he did start the second half of yesterday's game. So Nick Nurse finally did it. And the Raptors finally won a third quarter. I think that was probably the first third quarter that they won. Definitely, the biggest point differential they've ever had in a third quarter because they tend to lose those quite drastically. And then the fourth came and the Raptors offense completely fell apart to pieces. But Boucher was the one bright spot. And so, yes, I think you have to start Boucher. You have to reward him for how well he's playing. I think when you're a team that's not contending right now and you're just looking to develop and retool and like bring your young guys up, and I understand Chris Boucher's 28, but he's still a part of this young core, bringing in this next iteration of this Raptors team up, you have to reward positive play. So I think he should be rewarded with a start. And I also just think that Alex Len and Aaron Baines have been unplayable. So to me, it's just an easy move right now. And it'll suck, you know what I mean? Like OG is going to have to take a beating. Like his body is going to hurt. He's going to be playing the 5. And we saw it yesterday with Stanley Johnson playing some of those minutes too. So Nick Nurse is going to have to get creative. He's going to have to go in his bag and find some tips and tricks because Boucher just doesn't have the size to guard 5s right now. And so you're going to have to play small. And Yeah, that's kind of, unless the Raptors get it big, this is kind of the world they have to live in right now. Zesty Morden asks, oh, this is another question about Boucher. All right. So very important basketball question. Who has the best New Jersey design this year? And what are your favorites in the league? Okay, best jersey designs this year. I'm going to have to say, okay, this is going to be controversial. I don't like the Spurs Fiesta jerseys. I love the court design. The color scheme is really fun. I just don't like the jersey. It kind of feels like a knockoff jersey as opposed to a real one. Not a fan of those. I do like the Raptors OVO ones right now that just came out. I like the Suns with the little, what is it called? It's like pixelated, that pixelated. Yeah, I think the Suns, and then the Heat always have fire jerseys. Like, the Heats always look good. I think the Nets one is hideous. So to me, probably the Suns as my favorite of like the new release city edition jerseys, and then the Heat's always up there though. I gotta give them credit. And then for the best jerseys to me, just like regular, it's gotta be the Blazers. I just love it. I think that they have the dopest jerseys. All right, so I'm just looking through the comments here. A few people have asked questions. Kevin says, thoughts on Oladipo on Houston and LeVert on the Pacers. I like that deal for both of those teams. Like, I like the fact that Houston got Oladipo because we know that Tillman is a cheap boy. And Victor's expiring and probably going to be on Miami next season, right? And so he just gets to get rid of some money there. So that works for him. And then LeVert on the Pacers. I like that for the Pacers because I think he can replicate the production that Victor Oladipo was giving you, but he has more years on his deal. So you're just not getting rid of one of your best offensive players, basically. So I like that for the Pacers just because it gives them long-term stability, and it's cool for Houston because they're broke boys and want to shed some money. Which available big man should the Raptors pursue? Drummond, Love, Turner. I don't think that Love is the answer here at all. I don't think Turner's available for anything that the Raptors could offer even. It's tough because it's like, I don't want to say it's Drummond, but like, who's available? And that's cheap because like you're not getting Turner for anything that the Raptors are willing to offer. And let me sit on that because I don't want to say Drummond. I really don't. I see Baines and Boucher trading off on the starting five. With like Boucher, like they're just gonna rotate depending on the matchup. That could very well be it, right? If you're going up against Joel Embiid, you're gonna want a big body. And looking around the league, there are very few centers that are just like these giant men that take up a lot of space. So I definitely agree. I think it should be matchup based. But on nights where you're not going up against a Joel Embiid, on nights you're not going up against a Zion or give me somebody else who's like a big body. I guess even the Celtics start with two bigs. On nights you're not going up against that. Yeah, Boucher should probably be your starting five because that's what makes the most sense. And I did it, you guys. I spoke really, really quickly, so I got through every single question, and I did it in time. So I'm really proud of myself. And thank you guys all for joining me. This was really, really fun. I hope I made sense because I know I was speaking a mile a minute. But I had a lot of thoughts flowing in my head, and I hope you guys send me some more questions when I do this again. It'll be better. It'll be smoother. I promise. And thank you guys all for joining me on this first week. Thank you once again to all of my guests this week. I'm looking to have some more people next week, talk about some other things that are going on in the NBA, focus on some other teams. Thank you. Yeah, check out everything on Basketball News. And there are lots of dope articles dropping. The guys has a new podcast that dropped. So yeah, a lot of great content. Thank you guys.